Welcome everybody to your bitch radio, the first ever podcast. If you said it, we probably thought of it already. And today's podcast is going to be about the military judicial system. Well, specifically, should there be or should there not be? And I would like to start off saying how wonderful it is to be able to present to you, the audience, this topic, because it is a very good topic to talk about, especially since the military judicial system is not tracked publicly. So this might be the first time you ever even heard of the military judicial system in your life, and that there is such a thing, except for what you see on NCIS TV. Now, the military judicial system has a huge problem with it. It's called United States versus Hills. It shows the corruption of the military all the way through. And what we were going to talk about is that half of the cases were overturned because of that. Well, half of the half. Not all cases in the Hills got overturned. But you had people applying for it because it was the last standard of hope. Because they did not want to be sex offenders. But some of them deserved what they got. For real and honest. They deserved it. However, some of them were innocent bystander products of it. But without United States versus Hills, those innocent bystanders of it would not have been affected. Possibly. The most craziest thing in this world is that we just don't know. If you take 1 ounce of an evil deed out of it, will God show us mercy? And, the evil deeds is what I'm talking about is the power of Satan. Through the power of Satan, the lawyers, they get promoted. Defense attorneys eat with the prosecutors. You have to start out being a defense attorney to become a prosecutor. And once you're a prosecutor, then you want to become a judge. Where is the borderline for not coveting your neighbor's possessions? Now, in some cases, we'll discuss coming up in this podcast. There were cases that were overturned because of it. There are cases that were not overturned because of it. Several people had applied for it. But why did it happen to begin with is what we're going to be talking about. And where do we go from here is what the main topic of this podcast is about today. Now, there'll be other podcasts, but this is what this main one is about. Where is the people that care enough about others in this United States of America to do something for others? Now, we all have heard the saying, it takes one to change the world. The underdog to change the world. But what happens when the underdog wants you, the superheroes, to do something? There are several instances where you guys just don't. We all know the stories about, what was played on the radio a couple of years ago. We all know the stories of where, and I'm walking a fine line because I want to stay on topic with this. But what happens when you know something is wrong in this world, and you know for certain, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that something is wrong in this world, and you do nothing about it? Take, for instance, Florida. Ron DeSantis. He knew that underage viewing pornography was wrong. So what did he do? He said, "It is by law I declare that the Floridian government will sue any provider of pornography online if they do not require them to place an ID card to view pornography." So that's 49 out of the 50 states. What took so long? Well, no one said anything. No one cared. In fact, I spoke with some people, and this is getting a little bit off topic, but I want to breach this topic for a little bit. I knew some people that I talked to on TikTok. They said, "No, I will put up more servers. I will put up more pornography servers." That was in their hearts. Why? Because why would you take away what you had for the other kids? I said they don't need it. They have an imagination. Something you don't have. They truly don't need the internet. No one needs the internet. No one needs the internet. You take away the internet, and in 5 days, you guys will have maps all over your country. You will have tour guides. You will have new jobs. No one needs the internet. But the internet is purposeful. We have satellites. Yeah? You have satellites. So that means that you are being taken pictures, that you have the potentially to have your picture taken everywhere that you go outside. We have microphones that we can transmit our voice to people. Yeah, that means that people can listen in and know exactly what you're talking about at all times. But we have less crime. No, you have an extraordinary amount of more crime. They just don't talk about it. I took a page from China or from Japan. They just don't talk about the crimes. Japan does not advertise their criminal courts and their records and stuff. You only hear about it when you see it in public and there's a recording of it. And that's if they play the recording. What happens when they don't play the recording? Just food for thought. As I say, what can you do? Now, welcome again. This is the first ever podcast of Yo Bitch Radio. So, what is an overturning, you say? An overturning is where the case gets appealed into a court system. There's 3 levels of the court system. There is the lower court, which is the Court of Criminal Appeals of the Navy or the Air Force or the Army, etc., etc. The Coast Guard, I believe, gets seen through the power of the Court of Criminal Appeals to the Navy. Or no, they get through the Court of Criminal Appeals of the Coast Guard. My bad. Now, the second court is the court of the court. Let me think for a second. The court of I believe it's called the Court of the Armed Forces, or the United States Armed Forces Court of Criminal Appeals. And that is the major court, the second court that's inside of the hierarchy of things. So let's just say the lower court was prejudicial against you, or there was unseen error of the lower court of the armed forces. Well, go up to the United States Court of Criminal Appeals, and they will have to look at your entire record and see for themselves if there's any constitutional errors in it after they affirm it. And they'll also look at the errors that you submitted. You can submit as many errors as you want that you can claim about your trial. Most of the time, people are ignorant and they cannot really think of the errors, and the lawyers really don't read it. That's why you have higher courts that look at this stuff. except for one court. Hill's attorney actually found the error, and I knew there was error too. But sometimes God wants you to relax. Yeah, relax. And this error was written as so. We're back. We were just updating the slide that I was going to present. So as you can read, this was one of the things that they had, and this is actually a new thing, order how's that word go? Revision of the old military order. In fact, when Obama Rama came into the picture, all the judges that were democratically leaned switched the order, revised it, and made it so. All because the president listened to his wife. She wanted to go after military sex offenders, and she said that there was a big problem in the military with it. So, because his wife told him so, they said that they found proper use of crimes that somebody was charged with, that they were found not guilty and were likely to have committed other similar crimes based off of that, regardless of if they were presumed innocent. Now, you might not think this is a big idea or a big problem, but I knew a man named Rousseau, and Rousseau had this problem in his case. But because the military judge was sitting over his trial, well, Rousseau didn't get his appeal, because they said regardless of what was written in the order that he was mandated to follow, he was presumed to have ignored the military order that he was supposed to follow and stick with a constitutional order. Whereas if you had a trial by jury members, well, they were too ignorant to have known, and therefore, more than likely, they got a retrial if it presumed that they were found not guilty of a crime in their trial. Everything after would have been bootlace. Now, do you think that is a fair decision? If I told you that you, Mr. Huber, you had to go to work every day at 5 o'clock, sign an order, but then you had a personal obligation to come in at 4 o'clock. And if you came in at 5 o'clock, well, I would just assume you came in at 4 o'clock every day. And if you came in late, I would assume you were on a break. And I would not test or try that theory that you ever came in at 5 o'clock. You always come in at 4 o'clock, Mr. Huber. So, Mr. Huber, do you think that is a right thing to do? A thing of assuming one knows the knowledge? Well, there's no public outcry. There's no voice for the people. There's nothing, because it's not publicly tracked. So why is the military trying these cases of husbands and wives? I look back and I think to myself what Rousseau told me. He said that he was not guilty of it. That's all I can say about that. I wasn't there. I wasn't part of the jury. I can't really speak on a personal opinion of it. Besides that, I knew that he was a very decent man. And from what he told me, she adored him. She loved him. But again, there's always marriage troubles. especially when you're a service member's wife, a dependent. You serve just as much as he serves. That makes sense. And I think that when you do report an allegation, the family advocacy's first maneuver is that they give you a pamphlet that says that you will get paid money if you for domestic violence if your husband is found guilty of rape. I believe the amount is somewhere between $5,000 to $15,000, which is the first thing that they show the person when they come to them. They bring the pamphlet with them and they let them know the benefits of, well, testifying. And no, the police were not called, do not need to be called. It could be a one-on-one meeting. Yes, the police can be there and go away, and then they come and talk to you and try to convince you. Yes, that is a fact that family advocacy, they speak one-on-one with people. They don't speak in front of the police. Even if it's a unrestricted report, they don't speak in front of the police. Yeah. So, as far as it goes, there's there is also if there's anything that has to do with immigration, um, there's a law that says that they must, if they're applying for immigration, to get immigration, there's a statute, I should say, a statute that says that um, she has to testify or assist in the prosecution of her abusive husband, whether he is found guilty or not guilty. That's just where the cards lie. Honestly, I can't tell you how many times I heard consenting adults turning off their cell phone before going, turning off their cell phone before going into a room, and then them using that against them. It's a thing. I can't tell you when enough that I heard senior chiefs. They had their hand. They touched a junior sailor's hand, and he took a plea deal to say that it was for sexually gratifying reasons, or else he would have had to face being a sex offender. But just touching a hand as a senior chief can get you put into jail. I can't tell you how many times that I heard that service members using their own children or as witnesses to the relationship, or using their children as relationships, as anchors for the defense. Definitely happens. Terrible tragedy too. They bring the child in sometimes to a forensic interview, and if the kid saw nothing, knew nothing, and just loved his dad, it's not used. They would have to bring the child into court to testify. And I know of the Xavier, we call him, and he actually said that he was not going to bring his child into court and traumatize him, just to say that he knew nothing. He just said that he assumed that the jury would just figure out that he knew nothing and discuss and deliberate it that way. But he didn't want to have to see, he didn't want his child to actually look at him with those type of eyes, to say to himself, well, yeah, I need you to relive or have a memory of this. No. It's much better to say that Xavier met with consequences than to traumatize a child. That's how he views it. But I understand, when a dad and a child have a relationship, you know, the dad feels like, he has to bring everything that he has so that he can have a communication and relationship and to be the parent and be free and to provide and do all types of stuff for their child. So I don't really look at it the same when a child testifies of a motive. But I do believe that a lot of the cases in the military, they especially emphasize the point that that you can convict on a one witness alone if you find that witness credible. I believe that you need to have a two-tier conviction. You have to have two witnesses, whether that is a bruise on the skin, that will be a witness. Whether that will be any type of DNA kit, that will be a witness. Uh, Whether that be a verbal confession or a recording, that will be a witness. Now think about it. If Xavier had 5 years with his wife, and apparently since the honeymoon, you know, she was raped. You would think, you know, Xavier's wife would have well a recording of anything, any type of recording. It's not hard to press the record button. She had a phone. She had access to the money. They had a joint bank account. You would think that there would be some type of evidence to get that two tier, but there wasn't. So there's evidence that wasn't shown in Xavier's trial, and I look at him because he was actually one of those people that was released on United States versus Hills, and I look at him and I ask him these questions. I say to him, "Did you do it? No. Were you bad to her? Yes. Yes, I was bad to her. You know." And Xavier took a lot of time to think about his relationship with his wife. A lot of time. He always dreamed of the day that he would get to see her again, whether that be on earth or in heaven. But he practiced a lot, in segregation, all types of things, thought about her. There's one story is that he told me. He said that he got a My Daily Bread, a Catholic Church pamphlet, and he said to himself, he didn't know who sent it, and he said to himself, he said, "Wow, I think my wife sent that." So call him delusional, call him crazy, but honestly, it was probably another prisoner that sent it in good cheer. But it's always nice to send your neighbor My Daily Bread. You never know what they might think. To sign them up, it's free. To spread a little joy in their eyes. It helped Xavier to get through those 3.5 years that he was wrongfully convicted, and to give him 100 years more on this earth to say that he loves her. It says that no matter what happens, I will love her. You know, that's the sad part about this relationship. And it's the sad part about things. But everybody knows that life is just, you move on, right? Xavier said that he really felt agape love. Love so strong, love that he showed to God. He said that he cannot move on because he loves her like that. Even though Xavier found out that she remarried, moved on, he said she still prays for me. I believe that. Well, so why is the military trying all these cases? Because there was not enough conviction or evidence that the victims of a crime were being taken serious in the military. And so, it makes a very valid point that there should be a court martial if it's military on military. I think that that's a very good point. It should be. Because of the jurisdiction, unless it's in the states or away from the jurisdiction. But I think that it's very important that wrongdoers be held accountable for their actions. But I do not think that should a crime happen in the states, that it need not go to the federal court for processing. I believe that, or they're both federal courts. They need not go to the civilian court or the civilian federal sector. But they do need to have good order and discipline if it's military on military, or if it's military on a victim. They do need to have some type of court martial. They really do. But these people are trained in the way that they think. They teach them if you drink one glass of alcohol, you cannot consent. That was in their training. If you have, they do go over some of the cases, but they do not talk about the appeals of the cases. They talk about those that are found guilty of crime. They never talk about an exonerated victim, because they still want to maintain a one-sided conversation. Now, Xavier, as we call him, he was offered a pretrial agreement, he told me. And that pretrial agreement was that he would not be a sex offender. He would only have to spend up to 1.5 years in prison. He would keep his college benefits, and he would get a bad conduct discharge. He actually considered it. He said, "Do I have to lie and say that I did something I didn't do?" Well, he said, "You're gonna have to say some of that stuff," to him, his lawyer. So he told me. And Xavier said, "I will go to the highest lengths to declare my innocence." It's an interesting story, because that means that he was risking up to life in prison, a dishonorable discharge, and eventually when you go to a prison system in the military, one day you're in the military brig, and then the next day you're in a federal prison system, a civilian federal prison system. So the military says that they can't house every single member of the military that's convicted of a rape or a murder for a duration of their entire sentence. They actually need to rely on the civilian world. So if there's a reliance on the civilian world to house military criminals, then why is it that they're not given the same rights to a civilian court? That's the moral and the compass of the story. Should a military court be beyond a reasonable doubt? They already train the jury members, and then they pick the jury member that they specifically like for the collateral duty. Usually it's one of the best sailors in the unit, ones that agree with their philosophy. They don't pick a as the military will call them, dirtbags. They pick high-ranking or high-achieving enlisted um, people that really are 1-2, and they follow the step. So I think that given the appeals, there are certainly people that are innocent in jail right now. I knew this one man. I knew one man named Hal. He was a Marine, and he went through court, and he got appealed, and then they sent him back to court, and his wife testified again against him, and he put him back in, and then he went to go appeal it again. Simple as that. He kept appealing it, and he wouldn't take any. Well, I wouldn't know, because we didn't actually speak of things as long as I knew of him, of any agreements that they had. But he's just one of those guys that were, he certainly talked as if he was innocent. But I knew a man named Parker, a Marine. He said that he was innocent too, to me. And he said that he was going to go to a DC court and have everything overturned. And then he sat down with me and he communicated to me that he actually was guilty 100%. He did everything that they ever said. And then he asked me to basically console him, give him some type of reward. And I was only there to actually open up my eyes and go on tour and see these people. For that was my job in the military, was to actually open up and see these people and see how they lived. And honestly, the military brig, on the tour I went to, they eat steak and lobster. They eat pizza on Fridays and chicken wings. They have cheesecakes. They have salad bars, freshly prepared every day. If they're going to be treated as such, how do we treat our civilians? Now, I agree, the military members, they deserve a certain level of respect, because only about 7 or 8% of the military of the United States population can join the military, and only 1% do. So they do earn a certain level of dignity. And then they had decent classes for training. They had decent programs. They brought in a personal chef that I met, and he prepared all the people that went on tour and everything with the cooking of the prisoners that were going through culinary school. They were learning a trade. It was a nice meal. I still remember the bread. The bread was great, and the steak. The prisoners got to eat very well. They had a library, a religious library. They had, I went on tour to a county jail after that, and see how they were living. And the military has a far better computer system, a much higher LexisNexis for reviewing court records and to get a defense going and to view court records. They had a much open access to computers. It was funny because they actually drove me and all of the members with me to to this Montgomery County Correctional Facility, and they didn't want me to. They wanted to show me around, but I asked specifically to go to the segregation unit, and I saw that they don't give them clothes right away. You know, they actually allow them to be naked, and you know, it was one of those things that um, was weird. And yeah, I say that they allow them to be naked because, you know, at first, you know, they give them clothes that just don't fit, right? And then, you know, the one that I saw was allowed to be naked was actually saying, "I want my clothes," because apparently he threw his clothes off. And, you know, I just sat there and I was wondering why they weren't giving him his clothes, you know. And then they took me to the camera room where, you know, I actually saw that that person without his clothes on got beaten up pretty badly once the guards were away. And so I was just wondering what was going on in that place. It was really sad. As I walked through, it was so much different than the military parade. As I walked through, I saw a girl. You know, she was trying. It looked like she was trying to commit unaliving. Um, I just saw just the sadness and the look in people's faces. Um, you know, a lot of the people were suffering from some type of mental illness. Maybe RFK is onto something. Maybe these inoculations are doing something to us. Maybe. You know, I'm telling you, the way that they prescribe medication is very interesting. Because, you know, me personally, I was a corpsman going on these tours. And I actually seen firsthand of a co-occurring facility on Fort Belvoir. And, you know, I met the doctor and I met some of the patients there. And, you know, this one patient in particular, you know, fat as can be. I'm like, how did you gain so weight? And he was just like, I gained it from the medication. I was like, well, what do they have you on? And he told me, he was like, well, I take about 30 milligrams of Risperdal a day, and they give me an injection of it, and they give me benzos, and they give me, what else? He said benzos, Risperdal, and I can't think of the other ones, but I think there was one more, you know, and, you know, I was just like, what happened? He was just like, I was going to court, you know, and basically my commanding officer temporary additionally duty me to this place. Everything was fine, except for I had legal issues, and you know, they said that I was disabled and I was going to get a military retirement for mental health, and I just had to take this medicine, talk to the therapist and the counselors and everything, and you know, he was really tough. You know, he looked like a blueberry in his military blue digis. You know, but I really feel for him. You know, other people were you know as well just trying to deal with PTSD. You know, and different types of things. One story I can tell you is that when uh, I went on tour there, because it was really interesting because they sent me on this military tour all over the place. Basically, I had to, you know, write a report afterwards, a debriefing, and you know, uh, tell my tell the admiral of the Joint Base Anacostia Bowling, or no, not Joint Base Anacostia Bowling. What am I thinking? Of the Washington Navy Yard, exactly what I feel was what was entitled as appropriate responses, um, not for correctional purposes of these facilities, but what type of feeling did I get? And I basically said, you know, I feel like I feel like a lot of this stuff is unconstitutional but fair. I basically said it's unconstitutional. That a lot of it boils down to cruel and unusual suffering, but not for everybody. When I think about their interest in the facility, I knew that it wasn't about the change, but it was about the practice of going on tours. And usually it was because of these tours that they would be future jury members. I particularly went on these tours for um, my own personal beliefs. I asked if I can go see other places. I asked to be an EMT. I asked to do the training of the MIC-MAP. So most of the time, people didn't take me serious because I was a corpsman at a lower rank. They say if you want to get anything done right, you have to climb in the ranks, and I didn't. The highest I ever got was an E4. But E5 entitled sometimes with my entitlements, but that's the highest I ever climbed. I really think back, and nobody ever talks about this, but there's several reports that over medication in the military was a big thing, and overly medicating somebody can cause medical illnesses. It really can. It can trigger illnesses because they're giving you synthetic brain cells for the most part, or brain neuroplasty. You know, neuroplasty is basically your brain's response to a new feeling or a new chemical or a new outlook. And, I think that my belief is that a lot of it is, for paper soldiers. They don't actually look at their soldiers as human beings, but they look at them as paper. Um, by the numbers, as I said earlier, by the money that they have left in their account, they have to they want to spend it so that they can continue to get that funding and then more. Um, and they call that fiscal responsibility. No, the military doesn't report that they have a surplus. Um, Usually, left over out of their $1.4 trillion budget. It's because everyone's trained to spend it all. Whether that's right, depends. Depends. I mean, usually the stuff just how little can you spend before saying that your budget is bare bones and they won't give you any money because they're about to cut you. I don't know. Those are just the things that I see that is important to talk about because you know if I am telling you that they are trained to all get along and say and teach them about certain crimes that have happened and the consequences that they got. Well, it kind of paints the picture for the jury, but they say it's training. But is it really training if they don't tell both sides of the story? This person was sentenced for these years and spent this many times unlawfully incarcerated because his case was appealed, and then he was found innocent. They have no NKO trainings on that. They have no trainings on it in general. So, as far as good order and discipline goes, again, it's half and half. They're about 50% saying that, they follow their 10 general orders, and then 50% of the time they're saying that, only when it can consults me, and if you snitch on me or something, I'm going to fight you. If you make me look bad, I'm going to call you out. I'm going to call you a name, a slander, or something. Or you're going to have a personal beef with me. What is the difference between us? If we are so publicly offended at our people in the military, what's the difference between the Iranian Islamic police and the military? Truthfully, I ask you this. What is the difference that you would say is? If I change this sign to recently falsely convicted, or recently set up by the United States military, by their commander-in-chief. Who knows? All I know is that Xavier was ready to go back to trial. A miracle happened during his trial. He was sitting there, and he objected to something. And he said, "My problem is that these cut off words are prejudicial to him." That's what he said. And then his lawyers, they got all upset. They got all like, "Ooh, don't object. It makes you look bad." They start the trial again. 10 seconds go by. 5 seconds go by. And it says he sexually assaulted her. No bleeps, no nothing. Well, his lawyers got all antsy and said, "You can ask for a rehearing right now." But Xavier wasn't scared. He knew God had his back. He knew this was the perfect time. A retrial or rehearing, they only denied him the excellence that God had for him. So, sometimes in the court of law, you take calculated risk. If you do not object to something, then you waive your right to the appeal of it. So he knew that. He knew that if he did not object to it again and make a firm record on it, but he made a calculated decision. Xavier was found to be reduced to E1. No jail time. His allowances and pay restored to him. But why did he get reduced to E1? Well, it wasn't because of the rape. Xavier, he got in trouble with cannabinoids, a synthetic drug called spice. And spice was a synthetic compound, a fake marijuana, and it was sold in a designer packaging. It was sold at smoke shops near the military, especially on their bases. sold in Pennsylvania gas stations. It was all over the place until it wasn't. The problem is that once they banned the substance, they would just change the chemical compound of it one iota, and it would be legal to sell. And a lot of money was made in exchange hands. It was untestable by urinalysis. Even if the military did have it, they would have to prove in the court that it was actually spice and not just potpourri. And that's actually harder to do than doesn't. So I commend him for at least admitting his guilt on the crimes that he was guilty on, and admitting his not guilt on the crimes that he was not guilty on. I think that that the military, the general court martial, should be held to the same standard of a federal court martial as a civilian federal court, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. When you look at the standard of proof burden that needs to be in the military court martial, I believe it's 4/5 of the jury must find you one way of guilty, or three, or if you have one less than 5 or 4/5, then you're found not guilty. So you need, if you have a jury of 8, you'll need 3 or 4 people to find you not guilty. So they make it impossible for a hung jury. This was Your Bitch Radio, and if you said it, we probably thought it before. Bye.